Alright, YouTube, there's a lot of news out of Asia today, not just Fukushima, but also North Korea as well. I'll be talking about that later. It's time to discuss the problems at the Fukushima meltdown site. Of course, it's been fucked since it melted down in the first place. And for some time, people didn't really talk about it. Then, of course, you have sort of an unavoidable incident there. They've got a report on something like this where the radiation level inside of, I believe it's reactor 2 specifically, the radiation level in there is many times higher than they originally anticipated, which means they can't really conduct any business inside of it, even with robots, because it's so radioactive even they die after a short period of time, a few hours at most. If a human were to wander into the center of reactor 2, yeah, they'd be dead pretty quickly. They wouldn't last very long. We're talking about the ultimate. We're talking about something that is probably the next most deadly thing than maybe standing next to the elephant's foot at Chernobyl and hacking away at it with a pickaxe or something along those lines. But this isn't the only weird news we've gotten from Fukushima. Throughout time, things have continuously gone wrong with the cleanup there. Their ice wall appears to have more or less failed multiple times. Pumps have stopped working, leading to steam emissions. They've still got a problem whereby they're constantly storing this radioactive water, because what they're doing is they pump seawater into the reactors to keep everything cool in there, because there's still potentially, if it were to dry out, if the water level drops and heats up, it starts boiling off. Literally, there's enough radioactivity to boil the water. You've got the release of radioactive steam, possibly fire, and the burning of some of this secondary material. The sites would literally be melting down again at some point. More or less, of course. The corium itself has more or less escaped containment or is in containment. Not that that's much of a consolation for people living near Fukushima, but they're going to have to keep pumping it full of seawater for, a few decades probably, I would assume at least, while some of this material degrades over time and, becomes non-reactive. But this is just one of the reactors. You got to remember, Fukushima wasn't like Chernobyl. Oh yeah, the reactor exploded. No, this was a multi-reactor event, number one, that released much more material, number two. Whether or not TEPCO or the Japanese government is willing to admit to that fact doesn't really matter. Of course, people tried at first to say Chernobyl was, oh, don't worry about it, we've got a lid on the situation. Yeah, we've got like 100,000 dudes in lead vests that take 1-hour shifts, running up to the reactor and dumping dirt around it, and then that's all they can do for a lifetime. Some of them have volunteered to do more. You get that, like, helicopter crews dropping water on the reactor. They've got massive cancer. There's like thousands of people with leukemia there. But don't worry, it wasn't a terrible situation. The original estimate of the release of radioactive material from Fukushima, the impact on the region, is almost certainly vastly underestimating the actual long-term damage that's been done there. It's going to be a very, very long time, many generations, before anybody can ever consider residing in the exclusion zone around Fukushima, and even these marginal areas beyond that, while the radioactivity level is dropping, are going to continue to be substantially contaminated for some time. TEPCO, though, would have you believe that it's normal for a location to be so radioactive that even a robot can't live there. Much less a human. Imagine, again, a human wandering into there. Imagine, the world ends tomorrow, and the remnant of the Japanese population 100 years later stumbles upon these ruins. They probably form some sort of death cult around it, because anyone who gets too close to the buildings just suddenly fucking keels over or something like that. And then 1,000 years later, when they invent TV again, Ancient Aliens Japanese edition, did aliens put this here to trouble mankind or something along those lines? But they've still got radioactive water that they store. They release it occasionally for some reason, so why bother storing it? I'm not even sure. They're hoping the ocean will dilute the radioactivity. There's no such thing as bioaccumulation. They've got acres and acres of bags of dirt, radioactive topsoil that they've tried to strip out. The radiation that ended up in sort of the hills and mountains around the region every time it rains, comes down and recontaminates anything they've cleaned out in the valleys. It'll be a long time before that problem solves itself. It will clean itself up. These outer areas, the marginal areas that are less affected, will become safe over time. But when that happens, who fucking knows? It's not like mankind has a great deal of experience, a great deal of history dealing with this sort of thing. We don't. We're not really that long into the nuclear era, and other than Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, we don't have a lot of other major nuclear disasters to actually conduct studies on these things. And you can't even apparently study the inside of the reactors to see what's going on. Years ago, they had a robot, I think it was in Reactor 3, if I remember correctly, or Reactor 4, that put it in to the reactor. And they say, oh, we'll explore what's going on. And the film that it took was so massively distorted it was almost unusable. And that distortion was also evidence of an extremely high radiation level. You've got all these little bits of radiation interfering with its optics, so to speak. If a robot can't even last a couple hours there, a human's not even going to last a few minutes. The dosage is extreme, and within a few minutes you'd have more than a lifetime of your radiation intake as it would be normally. The damage to your DNA would be substantial. I feel sorry for people having to work around Fukushima. I think it was 2 years ago they discovered that if you look at the TEPCO live feed, you'll see a sort of tower. It's actually an exhaust port in the middle of the frame, sort of reaching up into the sky. There's a crack on that, a little bit more than halfway up, that emits a significant amount of radiation too. There's probably a blob, a chunk of alpha particulates or some shit stuck in the exhaust pipe. So that's still there. That's still creating radiation. All of that nuclear material that melted down in 2 of the reactors is still there in the reactors. It's why they're so radioactive. Even the ambient radioactivity around the site itself, just in the area where the TEPCO workers are normally operating, is very high. It's lower than it is inside the reactor. It won't kill you immediately, but it doesn't take very many days before you're reaching a potentially dangerous dosage. And then you've got these locations that are so highly contaminated, it defies reason. It defies even human belief. And there is no solution to this. The problem is Chernobyl is an inland nuclear reactor in a not so seismically active zone, let's face it. Of course, it's in northern Ukraine, near the Belarusian border. So when Chernobyl melts down, a lot of that stuff's just going to fucking sit there. It's not going to go anywhere. There's no risk of a tsunami hitting the Chernobyl ruins. It is near a river, but it's not exactly near the ocean. With Fukushima, though, it's right on the shore in an extremely seismically active region, and all you need is the next big one to hit in the right location. And the ruins of Fukushima get hit by another tsunami. And what exactly are you supposed to do then? If it washes out the roads and you can't access it, if it completely destroys the facade over Reactor 4 and sends spent fuel plummeting all over the ground, if it knocks over the exhaust tower and spews out a bunch of radioactivity there, if it destroys all the generators and pumps and all of a sudden you go from way too much water to, oh shit, it started boiling again, exactly what are you supposed to do? They're talking about enclosing the site, sort of like they did at Chernobyl. But it's going to have to be one fucking strong sarcophagus, and what we see with Chernobyl, the hastily built concrete dome there, helped. But it didn't solve the problem. And even the new sarcophagus that they've built and I believe now begun to move into place doesn't solve the issue, and it took them a very long time to even construct it properly and to get it into a working order so that they could actually enclose the reactor at Chernobyl. It's going to take them a hell of a lot longer to do that at Fukushima. Chernobyl, you've got a fairly large flat area, kind of easy to work around. Then you wait for some time. You've already enclosed the site in its first dome. Now you're moving the second layer into position. Fukushima is still partially exposed, right on the shoreline, right next to some hills, actually. And Japanese engineering is great, but it's going to take them a fucking while to figure out how to actually enclose a site, especially when you've got the situation where you have to pump constantly into it to keep from having a steam explosion or something like that, or to have a bunch of burning wreckage filling the air with radioactive fumes. How are you going to enclose the site? Is TEPCO suggesting that they actually intend to try to remove the second elephant's foot or whatever form it might take from reactor 2, or to remove all the blobs of shit from reactor 3? How are you going to do that? Even your robots can't get that close. They can't even see the actual fuel that's melted down because they die before they reach it. Exactly what are you going to do? I think, honestly, it might be better to, instead of bothering to build an ice wall, it might be better to dredge out around the site, build a stone wall of sorts below ground level, tunnel in, build something underneath it that's nice and thick, and then cover it over once you've solved that problem. The only problem is they pumped it so full of water for so long that the soil is semi-liquefied, not that far below the surface. And again, it's right on the seashore, so how are you going to fucking accomplish it? There's probably no solution. It's probably going to sit there and have to be pumped with seawater for decades to come, without any possibility that it ever gets fully contained. And that doesn't even solve the problem of for several miles around, the fact that it's heavily contaminated. You've got some of these villages, and of course the city there. It's uninhabitable. It's too radioactive. You can go in for the day if you've got you've got the dosimeter, and you've got the gas mask, and you've got the little hazmat suit and stuff. Yeah, you can go in there for the day. I think they only allow you to do it like twice a year because you achieve your yearly dose at that point, or possibly more than that. You're definitely going to want to filter what you breathe, because if you start playing around in the ruins of Fukushima and disturb that dust and inhale it, the problem is you get alpha particles in your lungs. You're going to get lung cancer. Yeah, there's a pretty high chance that that happens to you. I wouldn't want to wander around there. I'd much rather go and visit Chernobyl. I'd much rather visit a spot where the radiation level has further died down. There are some things there that are still massively, massively radioactive, not just in... go to BioNerd's channel. There are some vehicles there, actually, that were used, some tanks, trucks, and so forth, that were used in the immediate wake of the disaster. And they're still exceptionally radioactive. There are tanks there, tanker trucks that were... I can't remember what purpose they were being used for, probably to carry away contaminated topsoil. And on spots where those have begun to degrade, if you put your Geiger counter up to it, it's basically a lethal dose of radiation still, decades on, at a site that involved a single reactor rather than multiple reactors. One that fairly quickly was buried in a mountain of soil and concrete, and then you've still got lethal dosages of radiation at some of these sites. There are still alpha particles. There are still... little tiny chunks of radioactive material. I believe that BioNerd removed one from an anthill, actually. I'm not sure why the ants chose that location to live in. Apparently they don't care so much. They're not hideous mutants, although the radiation level inside of Chernobyl's reactor apparently has given rise to some sort of radiotrophic fungi, some sort of black mushroom that actually gets its energy from radiation, no less, as it slowly degrades that structure too, which is kind of why they need the second sarcophagus. It's a difficult issue. It's not going to be solved. Now, I'm not worried about, oh, the Pacific will be glowing in the dark pretty soon. No, that's not going to happen. Nature will absorb the radiation that was in nature to begin with. It just happened to be in some low concentrations in ores, let's face it. But the site itself is fucked. As far as human use, yeah, it's beyond repair, just like Chernobyl. Nobody is going to be living there for 100 years either. You kind of, sort of could. You couldn't do agriculture. Like, if you grew food, you'd probably get leukemia. But you could probably live there in a new structure that wasn't already contaminated, in one of the lower radiation level zones in the exclusion zone. You'd probably live there safely. But why the fuck would you want to? Unless you want to do some Fallout role-playing or something like that. It'd be interesting to see the Chernobyl site. But I don't know that I'd want to see Fukushima, especially when there's always that small remote chance that while you're there visiting, that's when the next tsunami hits. And then, you know, like, the tsunami comes, let's say you get to, like, the hillside, but it washes out the road, and there's no way out. And then all you are is you're sitting next to this fucking power plant. The pumps go off, the generators go off. It'll be hours before that's restored, and then you start seeing steam furling out of reactor 3 or something like that. That's an oh shit situation. I guess you'd have to run away as quickly as possible and hope for the best. Hope that there's no hydrogen explosion like reactor 4 experienced, because then you're totally screwed. Oh, you'll definitely feel some tingles, and it won't be from a Japanese parlor massage. It'll be from all of the radiation accumulating on your skin. People apparently, when they went to see the elephant's foot in the earlier days, those that were covered head to toe basically in lead plating, just to snap a photo and then run back out of the room. Apparently they could actually feel the radiation tingling on their skin. It was so high. Like, it actually caused physical sensations. That's how dangerous, really, these sites can truly be. So now, if TEPCO doesn't know what they're doing, even their robots are dying. They're frying their own robots just trying to get a fucking picture of the inside of the second reactor. What the hell are they supposed to do with the situation? I almost feel sorry for the Japanese political leadership for downplaying the entire event for several years. Imagine when the Japanese people hear, oh yeah, even our Gundam robots can't survive inside the reactor. That's how bad it really is. You know, especially in Japan, after they're the only country to actually get nuked. I imagine it's kind of a sore feeling for them. That's about all. Peace out.